Hey guys, I'm here today with Tim Wilcox, who is the head of International Investigators in Indianapolis. He's an old friend of mine. He knows lots of stuff, a lot of interesting history, and his cousin wrote a book called Target Patton. Tim had a lot of hand in this thing, and I thought you guys would really enjoy hearing some of what Tim has to say about this, especially in as much as Bill O'Reilly has made the whole killing Patton thing popular now. Maybe you want a little bit of the real story. Tim, thank you very much for taking time with us at MyServicePride. Talk to me.
My cousin Bob has been a writer for many, many years. He's just a few years younger than me. And I just happened to be chatting with him one time about Patton being assassinated, because my cousin's a World War II history buff. His father was a decorated colonel in the war, and so he couldn't believe that Patton was assassinated. And so I said, well, I know the guy that did it, and or was involved in the assassination. And Douglas Bazada, who we had hired before to do special ops for us.
We meaning?
My company,
okay.
International Investigators, and primarily to extract kids from other countries that were taken illegally from our country. And so I got to know him pretty well. And he was introduced to me by Nick Longworth, who's an old friend and was involved in Washington politics. Mm-hmm. And so we gave assignments to Douglas Bazada on several occasions, and I got to know him pretty well. And he was kind of intimating that he was involved in the assassination of the most famous general of World War II. And he'd actually taken some polygraph tests, and he'd passed those. And so I said, maybe to my cousin, maybe you ought to interview this guy. He was probably 85 or 86 years old at that time. He was one tough dude. He was the Marine Corps heavyweight boxing champion from 1935 to 1941. He was assigned to the OSS in a special operation called the Jedburgh, which is like the Navy SEALs now. They dropped Bazada behind the German lines, and he was very successful. And then during the occupation, after the war was over in Europe, General Wild Bill Donovan was the head of the OSS, and sometime in the fall of 1945, he assigned a special operation to Bazada to kill Patton. We don't know exactly where the orders originated from, but probably the commander-in-chief, which is President Truman at that time.
Yeah. Why would Truman have wanted Patton killed?
Pressures from the Soviet Union, pressures from General Eisenhower.
Because Patton was wanting to invade.
Patton was, I guess you could call him a little bit out of control. He was trying to marshal forces to invade the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
Had he been successful, he would probably have eliminated the Cold War, and who knows what that would have saved his country.
Can you imagine?
So there was apparently two other unsuccessful attempts at killing Patton. One was sometime in the fall of 1945. He was driving in the back seat of his Jeep through some small town, and the bad guys knew about it, and so they were going to drop a cable down and garrote his head. And it was coming almost like Inspector Clouseau in the Pink Panther. He drops a cigar and reaches down, and just as the cable went by, and so he survived that. And then there was another situation where he was in a reconnaissance plane, a Piper Cub, overlooking parts of Poland, and some guy got a hold of a Polish Spitfire and tried to shoot him down, and Patton's pilot was better and outmaneuvered it. So that was the second time.
And I read in here that that they observed 4 aircraft overhead, as if the other aircraft were doing reconnaissance for this operation below.
It was a major operation to kill him.
Yeah.
A lot of Bob's information came directly from Douglas Bazada, because he gave him 2 huge boxes of diaries and journals and documents and things like that.
That's amazing.
He went to the National Archives and tried to find the investigation and the report of the medical reports and all that. Everything disappeared from the National Archives. But what actually happened is the third attempt was going to be the day before he was going to leave for the U.S. to resign his commission. And he and General Gay went hunting in Germany the day before. And on the way back, there was a plot to kill him with a special air rifle that shot a mushroom-shaped projectile.
Was this Bezada's?
This was Bezada's operation.
So he was laying in wait with this air rifle.
Yeah, and somebody had stolen a deuce and a half from a motor pool, and the deuce and a half ran into the front of Patton's Cadillac limo, caused a minor accident. Patton was, at the precise time, was shot in the back of the head with this thing. It broke his neck, threw him forward to the glass partition between the front and the back seat. Had all kinds of lacerations on his head, and they thought he was dead, but he actually survived that. And General Gay, who was sitting in the back seat with him, didn't even have a bruise on his knees. So it was all contrived through Bezada's operation. Yeah. They take him to past several hospitals to another hospital in Heidelberg, and they put him in some kind of a special neck brace, and the neck brace was not working for him. His vital signs were diminishing. This all happened on December 11th, 1945. His vital signs were diminishing, and the next day the media was there, and there happened to be a British neurosurgeon that happened to be there. Looks at the x-rays, looks at the device on his head, and he says, that's the worst thing he can possibly do. Changed it around so it was more effective. In the next few days, his vital signs came back, and I think on December 19th, he had a press conference, and he announced to the media that he was going to go back to...
Patton had a press conference?
He was back. He was sitting up in bed drinking his bourbon and
smoking a cigar.
Giving the nurses a hard time. And so he announced to the media at like 10 o'clock in the morning that he was going to go back to Walter Reed for final recovery and go back into civilian.
Is there footage of that?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, he was dead. No autopsy, no pathology, no toxicology. The medical reports disappeared from the National Archives. The investigation reports have all disappeared. And Bob is really chronicalized everything that happened in this book, and you draw your own conclusion. But the conclusion that you would have to draw just from logic is that Patton was assassinated.
Now, was the operation in the hospital Bezada's action, or was he done with the air rifle?
The Soviet NKVD had totally infiltrated the OSS.
Yeah.
So it was probably a Soviet-inspired assassination.
And the OSS was a precursor to the CIA.
Yes.
Fascinating. Well, guys, this is an amazing book. If you've read O'Reilly's, or if you have heard some of the noise and you want the real story, Robert K. Wilcox, Tim's cousin, Target Patton, you can get it on his website. I
think it's robertkwilcox.com.
Yeah, or Google it, or you can get Amazon or whatever. It's awesome. It's really, really interesting. Hope you enjoy it. Thanks. Later.